Now, claims of bribery, extortion and standover tactics have cast a very dark cloud over the construction industry this morning. One of the reporters who has broken a story that's been a joint investigation now between Fairfax Media and also 7:30 is Nick McKenzie from Fairfax. Nick McKenzie, glad you could join us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
How widespread is the corruption in the construction industry across the country?
It's fair to say that in quarters of the industry in both Sydney and New South Wales, and to a lesser extent Queensland and Perth, the rackets are entrenched. There's companies who are winning contracts through corrupt associations and corrupt deals, and these involve outlaw bikie groups and very well-known organised crime figures.
How does the corruption manifest itself?
Well, basically, to get onto a major work site, a site that's controlled by the CEFMU in that they don't let non-CEFMU approved companies get on, these corrupt companies know they need to win union support. They've been, in some cases, paying bribes, in some cases giving inducements or kickbacks. A very clear case example we've put in the paper today involves a union official. He's resigned within the last 24 hours. He took free labour to renovate his house from a crooked company. In return, he gives that company his support winning contracts.
So when you look at the general landscape of construction companies across Australia, would you say, what percentage of them would you say were involved in these rorts, these rackets and kickback schemes?
Well, the crooked companies tend to be the bottom feeders in many respects, the smaller subcontractors. But that said, to win contracts, you need the knowledge of people up the tree. One of the most powerful people on a work site is a site supervisor. Now, that's a relatively senior position. They often work for major contractors. What do they know? The evidence suggests that the corruption not only involves the union, but people within building companies, often at least at project level, in quite senior positions.
But can the larger construction companies that might be household names to viewers this morning, do they have clean hands?
I wouldn't think so. I mean, unless their heads are in the sand, their people are seeing this day in, day out. It's an open secret in the industry. The real question is, where have the police been? Why haven't Australia's organised crime investigators been tackling this?
You had mentioned that resignation, that high-level resignation yesterday by the CFMU official. That was in direct response to the revelations put to him. That's correct?
Put to the union by us. I mean, it's I think pretty. It says a lot that a newspaper can advance evidence that leads to somebody leaving the union. Surely the union had a sniff of this previously, and indeed everything suggests that people within the New South Wales and Victorian branch of the CFMU have known about corruption in the past and failed to take enough action to deal with it.
That's one resignation. Do you have evidence of other union officials being involved in receiving things like kickbacks?
Absolutely. In both states, New South Wales, Victoria, there is a number of CFMU officials with some very serious questions to answer. We've said in the paper today that at least 6 officials in New South Wales, in Victoria, ranging from shop stewards, the most junior, to more influential people up the tree, have been given kickbacks or bribes in return for helping award contracts to crooked companies.
Well, David Noonan, the CFMU National Secretary, is joining us on the program in the next hour. If he tells us that he has absolutely no knowledge of any of this, do you believe him?
Well, I'd find that very surprising. In fact, I know he has knowledge of some of the allegations. The secretaries, the senior people in his branches certainly know of what's been going on. In some cases, senior people are doing business with organised crime figures. If the union wants to allow organised crime bikies into the door, as it were, this is what happens. These are the risks. Well,
you asked a question of yourself earlier, a rhetorical question about why then, given the extent of this and the knowledge of this, why the law enforcement bodies, the police, haven't done anything about it. Do you have an answer to that question? Because there's been so much talk about bikie gangs and the latest. They seem to be hot on the list of every law enforcement agency in this country.
Well, unfortunately, police focus on often what's on the front page of a paper. It's easy to lock up a bikie with half a gram of speed in his pocket. It's much harder to investigate a construction industry racket. It requires resources and it requires political will. And unfortunately, in the past, I think we've seen some policing agencies sniffing the political wind and saying to themselves, do we want to take something on that may lead to places we don't want to go?
What do you mean by that?
Well, the unions, obviously, the CFMU gives money to the ALP. The ALP lends its support to the CFMU as well. If there is organised crime involved in this sector, as we're quite clearly saying, there's a real risk there's tainted funds flowing around. In fact, in the coming days, we'll be revealing some more evidence around that. You let bikies and organised crime figures into your industry, you let them do deals with people in your union, then the risk will flow.
Tainted political funds you're talking about?
Well, absolutely.
So this is going to turn out to be a very big headache for the ALP.
And it's no surprise to anybody in the ALP that this has been a big risk. In fact, people within the ALP have been saying for years there's some problems here. We've got guys in the CEFMU largely, a small number who have formed some very unhealthy associations. Clearly things will flow from that. It's a pity the ALP perhaps has not taken some firmer action up until until today.
But Nick, under a previous political climate, of course, there was a watchdog appointed to this very industry to make sure that things were above board. Why has that organisation not been able to get to the heart of these things?
Well, that watchdog is still in place. They argue that it's a watered-down version under the former government. But the fact of the matter is that watchdog is not a criminal investigation agency. It investigates industrial relations breaches. We're talking...
But it could pass on knowledge and information that it might acquire.
Who does it pass it on to? The police. Now, if the police do not act, use their phone tap powers, use their search warrants, you need really great powers to tackle organised crime, and you need criminal investigation agencies. And the ABC, seen the Fair Work Building Commission, the new watchdog, is not that sort of agency.
So, where Virginia mentioned we've got Dave Noonan, the very senior CFMU official, coming on later. The wood's on him today to really be accountable for all of this.
Well, Dave Noonan has been saying quite rightly for years, if there is evidence of corruption and crime, it should be passed to the police. The fact of the matter is people are too scared to go to the police. Why hasn't the union contacted the police? It knows of these allegations. Why hasn't it passed them on?
Well, we've seen a number of reports in the Fairfax press this morning and had a number of questions put to us by Fairfax, but let me say at the outset the union's position on corruption is very clear. We will not tolerate corruption within the union. Construction workers are entitled to and are proud of the fact that we've had a strong and effective union in the CFMEU. Any individuals that have engaged in corrupt activity will not be continuing their employment with the union. They will be sacked.
Is there corruption in your union? We have news this morning that one senior figure has resigned already.
We've had one official in Victoria that, as a result of questions that were put to us by Fairfax on last Friday, faced a number of questions from senior union officials in our Victorian branch. When confronted with those allegations, that individual has resigned.
And that's an admission of guilt?
Well, if he hadn't resigned, he would have been dismissed.
I just want to repeat my earlier question. You're offering a defence there of just what your union will and won't tolerate when it comes to activities by your members. Are the allegations made here in the Fairfax Media and later today by 7:30, are they true?
Well, there's a very large number of allegations made. Some of them have been put to us with some evidence. Those will be thoroughly investigated, and if any steps need to be taken in respect of getting rid of people who've acted inappropriately, that will happen. There are a number of them that to us at this stage do not appear to have a firm basis. But I do want to say this, any issue of corruption needs to be dealt with by the proper authorities, which is the police. And if anybody, including Mr Mackenzie, Fairfax, or any other individual, Mr Hadgkiss I've heard on the media this morning, has credible allegations of corruption, we call on them to take those matters to the police, to the criminal law. The union will cooperate with any investigation by the police into matters of corruption.
But doesn't oversight also rest with you as the National Secretary of this union? You've been asleep at the wheel, Dave Noonan.
Well, absolutely not. We've had one matter, which is referred to in the Fairfax media, put to us by an official in New South Wales last year. An inquiry has been established into that matter and is continuing, including the use of external investigators, senior counsel from the New South Wales Bar to hear all matters relating to that.
But what have you been doing if the fact that this joint Fairfax ABC investigation has led to the resignation of this senior union organiser just 24 hours ago? What have you been doing for the last 12 months?
Well, when we've had situations in the past, and there have been a few situations in the past where we've had officials that have acted inappropriately, they have been got rid of. Charges have been brought under union rules and people have been dismissed. If there are allegations of corruption or illegality, they have been handed to the police where they have occurred, and that has happened in the past. I do want to say this. The vast majority of CFMEU officials and representatives are people that are working very hard in a very tough, high-risk, insecure industry to look after the interests of construction workers. If there are a few bad apples in the barrel, then the union will root them out and get rid of them, and we will not shy away from assisting in any matters that need to go to criminal law either. But I absolutely refute that the union's been inactive. Our policies are very clear on probity, on corruption and on all of these matters, and we have dealt with them in the past. I also think it's very important to note that around about 2000 we saw a whole slew of allegations made around corruption in the building and construction industry and the union. And a Royal Commission, a $66 million Royal Commission, with which Mr Hotchkiss was intimately involved, investigated those matters. And not one criminal charge was laid against any member of my union coming out of that Royal Commission.
Right,
so we do have to be careful to deal with the facts and not some of the moral panic that may from time to time be generated by elements of the media.
Let's just get a word in here, because I want to question you a little bit more about what you say about the fact that the union was not inactive. And you mentioned there a couple of incidences where you took issues on that you'd heard about and there were charges laid. So how many times have you gone to the police with matters that you've heard about that have troubled you and passed that information on to be investigated?
Well, the union around about in the early 2000s had a situation with a senior official in New South.
More recently than that, though. How more recently? If these issues have been around and these journalists have managed to find it, what have you heard and what have you passed on to the police?
Well, all I can say is this. I haven't taken any matters to the police because no matters of criminality that are at this stage have been demonstrated to be credible have come to me, and if they had come to me, they would have gone to the police.
All of this is brand new to you. You haven't heard of any of this, of people like Mick Gatto being involved, the Comancheros being connected, money and kickbacks of companies being paying officials money to go and gamble at casinos. That's all just brand new.
First of all, let's take those in order. It's well known that Mr Gatto has been around the building and construction industry in Victoria for a number of years. The union does not employ Mr Gatto. We don't pay Mr Gatto money. Mr Gatto is from time to time, as I understand it, paid money by employers to represent him, and he has had interest in companies. Now, the union's job is to get wages, conditions and safety right for our members. If Mr Gatto is breaking the law, then it is up to the police to prosecute him. I have not had any report that Mr Gatto, up until the last few days, has engaged in any activity which is in relation to our union, which would be capable of being referred to the police. But it's an open book. Let the police look at him, and if he's broken the law, then he should be subject to it like anybody else. In relation to outlaw motorcycle gangs, it is known that there are a number of outlaw motorcycle gangs that have been active around the building and construction industry. Now, we are concerned that some employers have relationships with outlaw motorcycle gangs, and in fact construction workers have been the subject of some of those issues. We saw on a construction site in Brisbane last year, on a Grocon site, reported in The Age, a large photograph of an outlaw motorcycle gang member who'd been brought to that site to intimidate striking workers, and that was a Grocon site. The union made statements about that at the time. We're unaware as to whether the police have taken any issues there where the workers were the victim of that sort of intimidation.
So you're saying it's cutting both ways at the moment. It's not so much that the unions got the problem, but the larger construction companies are just as bad. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying, Virginia, is there's a couple of things. I think that there are people who may be members of outlaw motorcycle gangs who have jobs in the construction industry and may have had for many years. Now, we're not in a position where we ask people, are you a member of an outlaw motorcycle gang before we have a construction with them?
But given that we've all heard, even just anecdotally, so much about the connections between those groups in society and the construction world about them, why would you not want to know?
Well, it's not what we want to know, but the reality is that some people may have legitimate jobs in the construction industry who may also be members of one of those organisations.
And that would not cause you a problem?
Well, not if they're not breaking the law or participating in any illegal behaviour at work.
What about for the look of your industry?
Well, just let me finish. To the extent that any criminal organisation, including outlaw motorcycle gangs, are involved in racketeering, in corruption or in improper behaviour in the industry, it would cause us great concern, and it is a matter that the police do and ought to be investigating.
Finally, you talked about a range of allegations. Fairfax says it has strong evidence that at least 6 Victorian CFMU officials, including senior officials, have received kickbacks. True?
Well, they haven't put that evidence to us, and we call on Fairfax, if they've got clear evidence of that, to put that evidence to us. They put one lot of evidence in relation to one particular matter, or at least some allegations, and
which led to the resignation.
We acted immediately on that, and we would act on any other matters. But not only that, if they have credible evidence of illegal behaviour by our officials, we call on them not just to take it to the union, because we're not about pushing this under the carpet. They should take it to the police. And if indeed those things are correct, then the police ought to act, and we won't be standing up for anyone that breaks the law. But I do remind you, we had a whole fanfare of very serious allegations in the run-up to the Coal Royal Commission. Allegations which in the end did not result in one criminal charge against any member of the union or any construction worker. Now, that was used as a stalking horse to bring in serious industrial relations laws, which took away important rights from construction workers. And what we see today with Mr Hajkis, again, is an attempt to conflate issues of industrial relations law, important workers' rights, with issues of criminality. They're quite separate, and they do need to be dealt with on their merits.